Hello, everyone, and welcome to MusicTherapyEd.com's Mindstorm Mondays, a webinar series featuring brilliant music therapists who want to share their expertise with you in order to help you thrive as a leader in healthcare. My name is Kaylee Thomas. I'm the Director of Continuing Education for MusicTherapyEd.com, and I am your host for today's webinar. As we have people tuning in, I would like to invite you to try out the chat box that you should see to the right side of your screen. We would love to hear where you're joining us from today and how your day's going. And I'll be monitoring the chat box for questions throughout the webinar, so please don't be shy. Go ahead and chat in, and I see a few people have already. So thank you so much and welcome. We're glad to have you here with us this Monday evening. And now I would like to introduce our fantastic guest this evening who wants to help you create systems for smooth sailing in your work, Allison Hingley. A native of Eastern North Carolina, Allison graduated from East Carolina University in 2010 with a bachelor's degree in music therapy. Allison completed her clinical internship at Banner Good Samaritan Medical Center in Phoenix, Arizona, attained national board certification, and served as a unit therapist and interim therapeutic programs manager at the Arizona State Veteran Home in Phoenix. In 2012, Allison completed advanced training in neurologic music therapy through the Center for Biomedical Research in Music in Fort Collins, Colorado, before returning to her home state. She received her master's degree in music therapy from Colorado State University in 2015, and she is the owner of Atlantic Music Therapy Services. Allison, we're very grateful for you to be here with us this evening, and we thank you so much for your willingness in sharing your expertise.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Well, we're very excited to have you, and it seems like we've got lots of excited viewers with us today too. So welcome. We've got people from San Diego. Hello, Hannah from San Diego, as well as Kentucky, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Atlanta, Utah, Cincinnati, Ohio, all over the country, and even Christina from Ontario. So welcome, everyone. We're very, very excited to have you today. And before Allison and I get started, we want to know a little bit more about you. So we'll go ahead and have the first poll go live. So we want to know where you work. Do you work in private practice? Do you work in a facility like a hospital, a school system, long-term care facility? Or do you work in a setting maybe not mentioned? And you'll let us know where you work in the chat. So go ahead, please. Please do the poll. Let us know a little bit more about you. And Allison, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my screen share, but Kaylee, I can't hear.
You can?
Now.
Okay. Viewers, let us know if you can hear an echo, and we'll do some troubleshooting if you do hear an echo. Okay.
In the meantime, I'll talk through it because it sounds like a stadium. All right, so I am Allison Hingley. I'm living right now right outside of Raleigh, Carolina, and I see patients with neurologic illness and injury, and oh, they went away. That was good. So that's what I'm doing right now. I am a big systems buff. I love for everybody to have systems that make them more comfortable and that help their work to be very productive. So I like to talk about things like this. And let me see if I can. I'm going to have to make my screen a little bit bigger. 1 second, sorry. Okay, that way I can click the down button. All right, so why do we need systems? I think the important thing to remember when we're developing systems is that you want to keep a task simple, efficient, and clear. And now clear is not the same thing as simple because some tasks can't be simple. They are very complex. So you want to have a clear progression of what to do at what step to make things, again, as simple and efficient as possible. So when would you need a system? If there's a task that's too complicated or could be more simple, tasks use too much time, too expensive, or if you have employees or coworkers that have to also carry out this task, if they're struggling to do that, then you might want to try to break it down or create a different way of doing that.
And so I thought maybe we could check the poll results because I think everyone has answered the poll. Thank you so much, everyone. So I'll go ahead and end that now. We have 43% of our viewers who work in private practice. Awesome. Yeah, 43% who work in a facility, such as a hospital, school system, long-term care facility, and then 15% who work in a setting that we haven't mentioned. And I do see that we have a few unemployed music therapists. Well, you're ready to go as far as getting your system set up for a very clear and efficient business. And I did see someone else. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback about the echo. We do have a few people on early intervention, too. Very cool.
All right. So if you need a system and you don't know what to do, I've made this very simple chart to follow, which may not look very simple, but can you see my cursor when I scan over this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So if you have a problem, you need to ask yourself, does a solution exist? If the answer is yes, you need to ask, can you afford it? If the answer is yes, buy it and be done with it. Make your life easy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you can't afford an existing solution, can you legally recreate the same thing? If yes, recreate it. If it takes up a lot of your resources, you might have to come up with your own solution. If you can't legally recreate it, save so that you can buy it or create something new. And then if a solution doesn't exist, do you have time to create one? If you do, create it. If you don't have time, can you pay somebody? Yes, then pay someone. And if you can't pay someone, then you have to save or you have to make the time. So those are usually the biggest barriers. Is there a solution? Can you afford it? Do you have time to create one yourself, or can you pay somebody to create one for you? Okay. And then I've noticed that in practice, whether you're working in a facility or if you're working in private practice, there's 3 major systems you're going to need. You're going to need administrative, marketing, and clinical. Even if you are working for the man, marketing is still part of your job. You have to be ready to talk about music therapy at the drop of a hat. As we all very well know, it comes up a lot. So I'm going to go through each of these systems, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I can't see the chat, so Kaylee, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Sure. We do have a little bit of feedback about the slides being a little fuzzy. I can see it well now, but the flowchart was a little bit fuzzy.
If I make it bigger, does that help?
Maybe if you go up to the percentage and make that bigger instead of the window, that would probably help.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we could get feedback from our viewers, if that is better for you, let us know. And I know, Allison, you did want to ask our participants if they had any problems where they might need to create systems. So that might be a good time to.
Yes, now would be a good time if you guys are thinking about your job. What's something that you have a hard time doing right now that you could maybe come up with a solution that would be more simple or more efficient?
And if you want to let us know in the chat box, we would love to hear it. So what's something that's a little maybe too time consuming for you right now, too complicated, too expensive? Let us know your problems in the chat box where a system might work for you. And Allison, we do have one more question before we move forward. If you would be willing to share your PowerPoint.
I would be willing to share my PowerPoint.
Okay. So would your work email be the best place for people?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So I'll share Allison's email in the chat box so she can send you the PDF. Awesome. And we've got some good feedback about it being clearer. So perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. So let's talk about some administrative systems that might be helpful. A pro tip is you have to know your administrative systems inside and out better than anybody else. So when I say administrative systems, I'm talking about time, money, and how you keep up with your contacts, which is, for me in private practice, a really, really big deal. You need to know who you've met, what they do, when you met them, where you met them, and then any notes about their your conversations with them in regards to music therapy. So one thing that I do is whenever I meet somebody, if I'm doing a presentation or anything else where I might run into somebody talking about music therapy, I ask for their business card and I write notes on it. There's nothing that says you have to keep their business card nice and pretty. I don't. I will not. So most of the business cards that I keep look like a hot mess because I keep notes on them all the time. Sometimes when I'm feeling really electronic, I'll transfer it over to my Google Contacts, but not really. I have a pretty good memory. But if you don't have a good memory for people, transfer everything over, and that way you can search. I know in Evernote, if you keep your contacts in Evernote, then you can search for like a key phrase, and that'll help you if you're like, who is that person that I met at that Parkinson's support group? And you can just search for Parkinson's and it'll bring them up. So in time, you need to have a scheduling system and you need to have a reporting system. These are different for, okay, so scheduling systems are how do you manage your time and where do you fit your patients in? Reporting systems, if you're working for an employer, if you're working at a facility, you may have one that you already have to deal with. So time cards or something like that. If you're in private practice, there's so many different ways that you have to keep track of your time. Sometimes you have to keep track of your time for when you've actually had patient contact, when you've done presentations, time spent in the car. Mileage is another way to keep track of time. So you need to come up with systems for that. If you want to know what I'm using, I'm happy to talk about that later, but mostly just these are things that you're going to want to think through when you're developing your own systems. Money is another thing. You need to have ways to document your rate, mileage, all of your accounts, your budgeting, and having solid systems in place for all of those things are very, very, very important for smooth sailing practice. All right, so moving on to marketing systems. I cannot believe there are people that actually do this, that if they see something on Facebook, they try to share it right then, or they'll only share one thing at a time. I don't have time to do that. So what I do is once a month, I go through all of the links that I've saved on Facebook, and I like map out a whole month or 2 months of all the links that I've shared to be shared at different times. Because if you have a business page, you can do delayed sharing. So that is batching blog posts, social media posts, all that stuff. It saves so much time. Another pro tip is know your audience and know your tools. So my website, for example, my audience is facilities and older adults who may stumble upon my website. My website is generally not for music therapists. If you're on my mailing list, then you've probably seen the one page on my website, but my website is, I think, 20-something pages, and I don't market to music therapists because that's not who I'm targeting right now. So you need to know which tool is targeting which audience. So again, my website, my social media profiles, they're all for general population, but mostly for the people that I'm looking to work with, which is facilities and older adults. And then my mailing list is for music therapists because I feel like music therapists don't really have time to search around on the internet. So it's easier to just land in their inbox and get up with them. Okay, so this is another little tip, and I don't know how many of you have maybe heard of these things, but MailChimp is great for sending out emails or chains of email. If you've received my ebook, you end up getting other emails in that chain that tell you, I just saw that somebody asked, what systems do you use for batching? I don't use an actual program. Hootsuite I've heard good things about, but I would rather go through and read it myself and schedule it myself, and then not have to. I just schedule it through Facebook.
And I can speak to that. I know we use Edgar, which is a program just like Hootsuite.
Cool. So what I was saying about MailChimp is, you can set up to send out a chain of emails. So when you receive my ebook, 2 days later, you receive a different email. 2 days after that, you receive a third email. And I think there's 4 emails in that chain. But I love MailChimp, and it's cheap to have a subscription to that. SurveyMonkey is a free one where you can send out surveys. And I send out surveys I actually manage a group, the North Carolina Triangle Music Therapists. So we are just the Raleigh-Durham Chapel Hill music therapists, and I've sent out surveys to them to find out what we're going to talk about at our meetings and what days work best for your meetings and things like that. And then I also use my surveys after I give a presentation anywhere. I always send out a survey asking how it went, what they would have had me do differently, things like that. Just a follow-up survey. And then recently I scheduled a presentation with a group of speech therapists and in a hospital. So the hospital allowed me to send a survey to the speech therapist to gather what they know about music therapy and what they'd like to know about incorporating music in their practice. So everybody in the chat has really good suggestions for what programs to use. That's great. And then the last one here is PicMonkey. If you haven't used PicMonkey, I don't know, it's just a really cool way to make your pictures. So if you have social media or websites and you want to edit your pictures, or I don't know what you guys use, Kaylee, for all the little...
We use a lot of PicMonkey as well.
Yeah, those little squares that you guys put out with the quotes on them and the bubbles in the background. I love those. And that's something that I would use PicMonkey for.
Mm-hmm. We do too.
Cool.
And while we're on marketing systems, we do have a question.
Okay.
And it's specifically about making calls for clients. Tina had said that she gets frustrated when waiting for contacts such as current clients, potential clients, waiting list, treatment team members, etc., to return phone calls. So it's kind of in the marketing as well as the clinical. Maybe it'll help bridge the gap. She said it's hard to keep track of where things stand when she's ready to move forward, but the other person has not returned her call or email.
I feel you, because I've got like 15 projects going right now and I'm waiting on other people, because you send everything out, you get all your stuff set, and then they take forever to get back to you. It's frustrating. One thing that I use is Evernote. I also use my stickies on my computer, which right now I can actually show you. My stickies are very organized. It's just one. Let me see if I can pull this up. Okay, so, oh man, it's really big. I don't know how to make that smaller. But basically, I have things that I need to do, like adding people to insurance, filing a CMS 1500, and then, my own stuff that I have to do for the house. But I just keep my stickies kind of like on my computer so that I can keep track of that. And then in my Evernote, if I have a lot of big projects going, I have a notebook that just says projects, and then the different notes down the side are the different projects going, and then I have to where I'm typing the notes backwards. So the last step that happened is at the top, so that I don't have to scroll down all the time to figure out where I am. And that way I also keep a history of what's happened in my business.
Awesome.
So I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, so let me go back to Google. Is funny because the menu disappears.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so marketing systems, we just talked about that. Now we're going to go on to clinical systems. So I just want to say that I'm going to close out of this because there's nothing else going on here, but a lot of music therapists I've noticed, especially in private practice, but even people who have jobs with facilities, they're working with people because they need a paycheck. And trust me, I get that. I worked in a car call center in Phoenix for a few months while I was waiting for another round at the veteran home trying to get in there. I interviewed for music therapy jobs that weren't going to help me pay my bills, but I'm so passionate about the field, I wanted to take them so bad. But I am not called to work with children. I'm just not. It's not my thing. And I am not called to work with in behavioral health settings. That's just not a strong point for me. Find the people that you want to work for and work with so that you can really enjoy what you're doing. I'm fired up about music therapy all day, every day, because I'm doing what I want to do. So that's kind of my thing with my pro tip for this part of it. But what I want to show you now for the clinical systems is my patient and therapist flowchart. So I'm going to try to pull up that window. Okay. The reason why I made these flowcharts is because it helps me to know treating people where I am in the process of treatment. So you'll see if I can pull up the Google menu. All right. So this is a little bit, let me know if you can see this. I'll wait just a second.
Could you make it bigger in the window? So yeah, there we go. Okay. That's awesome.
So these are my patient care flow charts is what I call them. And for this one, it's, can you see my cursor when I do this?
Highlight. I can see what you're highlighting, yes.
Okay. So this one is for individual patients that have insurance. But then if I go down to the next page, I have one for private pay. And then I also have for groups that are facility-based, and I hope I'm not moving too quickly, groups that are community-based. These are the 4 target areas in my practice of people that I would see. And what I've done is I've made a column for the patient, what they should be doing, and the therapist, what they should be doing at each step. So I'm just going to walk you through a patient with insurance reimbursement. Actually, this one's kind of long. We'll go through individuals with private pay. So they refer themselves, or the family or the physician does. And then I do a phone consult just so that I know why they want to be seen. I schedule an assessment and warn them of the $125 fee so that they know. And I request copies of a referral form that I have, their insurance card, and diagnostic reports. So if they don't actually have insurance, then this is a private pay flow. So I don't have to worry about that, but just to ask them if they want, just as a kind of like a second way of asking them if they want to use their insurance. Prior to the assessment, the patient has to gather their things, and then I have to gather marketing materials for for their insurance, just in case they change their minds. I like to be ready to go. And then we do the assessment. The post-assessment is where I develop treatment plan, write the letter of medical necessity if they're doing insurance and all that, and then send a receipt, a copy of their contract, and their treatment plan to the patient. Then the treatment is the easy part. We all know how to do that. And then I reassess or discharge, and I always send thank you notes at the end. I don't know if that's a common thing, but I prefer to. So I have these flowcharts so that whenever I'm working with somebody, if I feel kind of lost, I know where to go, and I can just check back what I'm doing. I feel like having a clear idea of how you want your treatment to go makes things much smoother. And before I had that, sometimes I was lost. Like, where are we? What are we doing? And I know that it's not this way with all populations, but for me, I like to schedule people for 10 weeks at a time and actually block out 12 weeks for them so that if something comes up and we need to reassess in the middle, then we can. But then I feel prepared to kind of discharge them at the end of that if they've met their goals and make room in my schedule for somebody else. Or, if we reassess and they need time, then obviously I keep their time out. I'm seeing question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe we can answer that. I love that you have everything in your entire treatment process written out. So that way, yeah, like you said, you don't even have to think about it. You've got it on paper, so you can just check boxes off.
Yes, and sometimes if I was seeing a lot of people at the same time, I would probably keep one of those in a file for the patient. I do keep paper charts. And it's not really paper charts. It's more like a file folder of which documents I have on the patient in my computer, and I check it off. And then if they've given me anything, then I keep a copy in there, a hard copy.
Awesome. So Ken does have a question, which I would love to hear your perspective. Is that his therapy is virtual to all of his global community. Do you have suggestions on creating a database of patients?
Ooh, that's tricky because you have to make sure everything's HIPAA compliant. And I've noticed that a lot of people use Google, and if you're not using Google in the HIPAA compliant side of Google and you haven't like registered for that, please register for that and protect yourself from breaking the law. But one way that I would maybe do that is virtual to all of our global community. So I guess I don't really understand who's in Ken's treatment team. But if it's a big group of people, one way you can do that is to have encrypted files in a password protected Dropbox or password protected Google Drive. But the trick is the file would have to stay locked, and everybody who had the password would have to keep the password separate from the file. So, but that's all. You should check with your lawyer about that. I'm really weird about HIPAA.
It's good to be weird about HIPAA. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we do have more questions about documentation. So maybe we'll keep going, and if you don't answer them, then I'll make sure to address them after.
Okay, well, I was just going to really quickly show people how I kind of quickly make up my documentation, because if you've seen my documentation system, like the ebook that I've shared, or if you've seen the form video that is in the emails that come, then you know my stuff is drop boxes and check boxes and things like that. I don't have time to do long narratives on everyone. I do write in narratives, but I type them because I'm a fast typer. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is just a blank Word document, and then I'll show you if I had to make up. I'm going to zoom in on this. If I was making a like an attendance sheet. So I don't know how many of you are working in facilities, but attendance is always a really big thing for them. They want to know who goes to what groups. And sometimes it's you just turn in your documentation at the end of the month of who came for what groups. So what I like to do is I make a table and say you're going to visit them 10 times. Then what I would do is put the dates here. And then so on. You know, I'm not going to fill that out in. And then I would put the patient's initials here, and then have all the patients listed down. And then instead of trying to, you know, go in here and click in an X and tab over and click in an X, what I like to do is take this little, I don't know if you guys can see my toolbar up here. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the checkbox. I just copy it, and then, so then when you protect the form, which I'm going to do by clicking this lock, I can say, oh, this patient was here on this date, and just mark that in. And then what happens is you can go through just on that date and click all the way down for all the patients that were there. But if a patient wasn't there, then you can leave it off. And that's just it's a quick way to use these Microsoft form fields. And then when I unprotect it, it's still checked, and I can edit the rest of the paper so that, you know, the formatting, the layout is what I want it to be. But there's checkboxes. This one is a text form field. So if you wanted to have patients' names, where you type them in. And I'm not really sure why it's not showing up shaded, but it usually does. And then that one is a Dropbox, which you can edit when you double click. So you drop down items like choose an item. And item 1, item 2. And then when you protect this, lock it. When I go to choose an item, I can choose whichever I want. So it's super quick to make these forms in Microsoft Word and then just save it to your computer, which is how I keep all of my documentation.
Awesome. And I can see how that would be really useful in different settings, especially the drop down and the check boxes. So you
Yes.
could very easily have different interventions maybe in the drop down box, or different goal areas in the drop down box.
Right. I have on mine all of the, in the first column on a treatment plan, it says, the drop down is area of need, and I put sensory motor, speech and language, or cognition, because those are the three things I really focus on. And then in the next column, it says, what did I use? And I have all the NMT techniques, and there are little abbreviations there so that I can just click, whichever one I used.
Awesome. And so I wonder, Marianne has a pretty good question. But first, before we hit Marianne's question, Amethyst was wondering what tab or what toolbox is the checkbox on in Word?
Okay. If you have, let me go back to this. I use an old version of Word because I noticed that I use a new one through Microsoft 365 that I got from the community college where I teach, and it doesn't save things if you unprotect. So if I unprotected this check would go away. So that's something to watch out for if you're going to use this. Make sure you play with it and get the data first, and make sure that the data stays in there. Where is it? I think it's in room. The protection is here. This is called. It might be formatting. Putting me on the spot. I should know this. It might be formatting. I'm not sure, but if you Google it, it'll come up, because that's how I stumbled upon all of this. Was I looked up how to make drop downs and checkboxes, and then I stayed up really late one night and just kind of got my wheels turning and made all these forms, and now I have every form of documentation on my computer.
Awesome. So it is a pretty standard feature in Microsoft then. Wonderful. So Jane has a question saying that she has to write sentences, and this will feed into Marianne's question too.
Okay.
Good. She has to write sentences, i.e. client said, did, appeared, or the writer feels that ... Can you comment on this type of documentation? So more narrative form.
Yes. So I actually include space for that in all of my documentation, because I do have, check, we worked on this, whatever, but patients often come out with stuff that you want to document in there. So if you're looking for, can you make it so that when you start typing, something else shows up in Microsoft? Yes. If that's what you're asking, that is possible, and I could help you figure that out. It would take me a second. But as far as typing goes, it's a lot faster for me to type. I'm not sure if she's having to handwrite, but if you have any way that you can switch that over to computer and just type and just practice typing, it'll make it really quick. Because I can type almost as fast as I can think.
And Tina has a good suggestion too, and I know I use this in our hospital documentation. You can do short links. So I have, ASSE for assessment, and that'll be my, my assessment, very quick shortcuts. And so I actually typed out originally all of the different goal areas that I might need, and I just delete the ones that I don't need.
Yes.
Awesome. So we have kind of an extension on that question with Marianne. Marianne, let's see, it was all the way down here. She said Microsoft Word documents at her nursing home job are much too time consuming. She has to do one document or a paragraph about a patient's responses per client, with 24 clients on Thursday and 20 clients on Friday. Wow.
Yikes. Okay, so here's my question. Are you having to document them? So you see 24 people on Thursday, and you have to document on all 24 of them each time you see them?
That's what I would assume, but Marianne, maybe she can type in and let us know.
Because I'm wondering, is that a facility requirement, or is that something that you put on yourself thinking like that's the best way to document on them? Because I've noticed in talking to a lot of music therapists, they think that they need to have a narrative every time you see somebody. And I'm here to tell you that it's perfectly okay for you to say, check, this person came, check, we worked on these things, check, this is how we did it. And then they're in different groups and different floors, and then have a narrative to kind of summarize their progress, every other week or monthly, especially in long-term care where you're going to have the same people for a very long time. They're in different groups on different floors. So if it was me, if I was able to structure the paperwork myself, and she may not be able to because the facility may not let her. But if it was me, what I would want to do is have some sort of form where this is the form that I used this summer when I was doing a grant-based program. I had an attendance bar for a person, and underneath I had a narrative, and then another attendance bar, and then a narrative, so that I could fill in, which days they were there. And then when I was doing their narrative, I just put the date in parentheses and a colon, and typed in whatever was pertinent for that person for that day, and kept everything in the same file for all of the patients for the same group for 4 weeks at a time.
Awesome. And it seems like she does have to do it monthly.
Okay. Yeah. It's time consuming. If you just sit down and do it once a month, that's a lot of people. But again, if you have the paperwork that's designed where you just click and say, hey, they were here and we did this, and that's great. And then once a month, you kind of just update. Somebody named Allison, that kind of threw me off. I was like, what did I just type? But if you just update it monthly, it's easier to do it if you keep everything in the same file.
Awesome. Simplicity, once again.
Yes.
Keeping it simple.
And I'm sorry. So maybe I don't understand it. Is it Marianne? Marianne can definitely send me an email if this is like a problem. I have to print out and file in each. Okay, so there's a way okay, I understand what you're saying now. And that's what I was wondering. So you have 24 different documents. You can keep them all in the same file and select which areas of the file to print. So what I'm saying is, if you have a column of somebody's attendance, and then not a column, a row of somebody's attendance, and then you have a row where you type in about that person, and then you have the next person is a row of their attendance and a row of their narrative. You can select just the 2 rows and click print selection and only print out about that one person, but it's all in the same file. So when you document, it's all in the same file, but when you print out 24 different pieces of paper. And I think that would probably save time.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like batching.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Batching. And she says, okay, that sounds better.
I'm glad.
And it's tricky. This is why I'm so grateful that you're here today, is because everyone has their own style of documentation, or maybe different facilities require different things. And when you're in private practice, that might mean having 5 different types of documentation. Or maybe now that means you have 5 different types of documentation.
But maybe you don't have to. Maybe there's a way to streamline it and make it faster.
Exactly. So thank you so much. We have some more questions about Google Apps. I think maybe our viewers have even helped us out here.
Oh, good, because I don't know. I don't use Google very much, just because I am not like HIPAA compliant on Google, so I don't.
Ooh. You don't mess with it, yeah. But I think we do have. Allison was the one that helped us out. So Google Drive is not HIPAA compliant on its own unless you do have a business account. So Google Apps or Google Business, same sort of thing. And it says she uses Dropbox with a SUSE edition to keep her paperwork secure. So I'm sure that means the double encryption.
Yes.
Because HIPAA means it has to be behind
2 locks, I think, is the minimum. And the reason why I am so crazy about Microsoft and why I use it so much is because I can lock the files in my computer. I can lock the files in the folder in my computer. I can lock my computer. I can lock my house. Now we're talking about there's 4 locks on it's really hard to get to those documents. I'm not saying that it's impossible, because I mean, there are hackers that could easily get through that, but they don't want that information, I'm sure.
That would be a lot to go through.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for speaking to that. We do have a few more questions. Let's see. We've answered Elizabeth's question. Let me keep scrolling down. Lots of great commentary in our chat box. So thank you everyone for being so engaged and excited about documentation. It's so awesome. So Stacy has a great question. This is more of an administrative question. She says, at what point in your practice were you able to start paying yourself for all of the admin hours that you were putting in?
I don't. And I know that sounds terrible, but my business is only a year old. And I have not had, okay, so personally, I don't work during the day at all. I have 2 young kids. I'm having a third, and my husband and I decided not to have me work during the day. So I see patients only in the afternoon and evening hours, and 2 days a week I'm teaching at a community college. Music appreciation is the worst. But so I pay myself for client contact hours, but the time that I spend doing the business admin stuff, I kind of pay myself in bonuses when the quarterly budgeting comes up. So that's what I've been doing. And it's not enough, definitely, to cover all of my admin time, not even close. But, you know, a nice bonus here and there is enough for our family and enough for me to still have the fire.
And that's wonderful. That's a perk about being a business owner, that you can be a stay-at-home mom during the day and
music therapist by night. Dun, 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 dun.
I love it. Exactly. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, and if budgeting is a question, there are tools to make sure that you're not using your time without paying yourself fairly. So if you are concerned about that, that's one of those solutions where on the map it says, is there something that's already created? Yes, there are solutions to that. Find it, and if you can afford it, make sure you're monitoring your time very strictly, and that when you're being a music therapist admin, you're keeping track of that very carefully. I don't, because I don't have to, and I don't like feel that need. But if you do, and you want to keep track of it and pay yourself fairly, find a system that will help you monitor your time and your money and make sure you stay in your budget.
Fantastic. And I know, like you said, there are plenty of resources via Google for that. And Eric had a great question. This is less about documentation, but more about starting a business. He said, it's hard to be choosy about who I take, as I am one of 2 music therapists in his area in Indiana. And there are so many people who need services, and he feels bad about not taking them. So if you have any advice.
I do have advice. I would say you need to consider ethically, are you serving patients well if they're not the patients you want to serve? If you don't feel intrinsically motivated to serve those patients. Because I can tell you right now where I live, there are other music therapists who are serving children, but there's nobody really in the school systems. There's not a lot of people in the hospitals. They're more in the Chapel Hill, Duke hospitals. So my suggestion is really consider, are you giving them the services that are beneficial? And even though there aren't other music therapists in the area to refer them to, there are other therapies or other resources, community resources that you could refer them to, and maybe they wouldn't be as beneficial, but consider what's going to be best for you as a therapist and the longevity for you in your career, because you have future patients you need to worry about too.
And as well as your personal, your passion is what will help you to create a career, continue your career, and you don't want to burn yourself out.
Right. If I had taken those jobs in Phoenix where I was working with kids and driving all over Maricopa County, which, by the way, that's the county that's on Cops. If you've ever watched Cops, okay, that's one of the counties. If I had been driving all over Maricopa County serving children who I'm not passionate about, I would have never come back to North Carolina and started my own practice. I waited to get in with the old guys because I love them and I love veterans. And I mean, so I just feel, I feel very much that, yes, it is can't receive services, but that's not our responsibility. That's our field needs to try to keep up. Insurance needs to recognize us as a valuable resource, and those people may have to travel or find a different outlet. I know the pain. I know the pain.
And Roya, we've already kind of talked about this, but maybe you could talk about it again, because HIPAA compliance is very important.
Yes.
We want to make sure all of our therapists are HIPAA compliant. So she asks, how do you keep your paper notes safe?
Oh, Eric, I feel your pain. Okay, so discharge. Okay, Roya, how do I keep my notes safe? I keep my notes all are password protected, and there's a different password depending on the patient. So, and I know that that seems confusing, but I actually have a system for making up the password, so it's really easy for me to remember. So those are protected. I have the option of also protecting the folder that they're actually in on the computer, but I don't, because my computer is password protected and my home is locked. And if I take my computer out in public, it doesn't leave my hands. So it's, even if it was to get stolen, someone would have to hack into my computer and hack into those specific files to be able to get patient information. And if my computer comes up missing, I'm notifying all of my patients to be HIPAA compliant anyways, that their information may have been lost or stolen. So I lock the files, I lock my computer, I lock my home, and that's one more lock than HIPAA requires.
And she actually means literally the ones that are on paper. So like any printed out files.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have those in a locked file box, and then I have them in my home locked. So
awesome. So really HIPAA just means it has to be behind 2 locks.
Yeah, and really in HIPAA, for small business owners, you have to remember everything in HIPAA is kind of fuzzy. And it says that you have to make sure that what you're doing is to the best of your abilities and within your means and things like that. They don't want you to go out and spend thousands of dollars you don't have on security that you don't really need. I mean, who's coming after a music therapist's house, patient files that you keep in your basement? I mean, it's just so obscure to think that somebody would be coming looking for patient information. And if your house gets broken into and your files aren't locked, then you are legally required to notify your patients anyways. But if you have them locked and your house got broken into, you don't really have to consider that a breach of security, because the files are still secure, even if your home was not for a moment. So
fantastic. Thank you.
Don't want to stress you too much, but be stressed.
Well, I want to let everyone know that we are reaching the end of our webinar today. So if you have any more last minute questions for Allison, now is the time. So we'll do the last call for questions. And I also would love to know what you're taking away from today's webinar. So I know just the idea, the mantra of simplicity and efficiency is something that I am trying to incorporate, not just in my practice and our practice here at Sound Health, but just in life.
In life, yeah. Yeah, so, I have adopted it so much in my life that when my sister shared the information about this webinar on her Facebook, she said, I knew all those years of hounding me about systems would go to good use and help other people. So she was being a little bit cheeky, but simplicity is so key. That's how you can be a mom and a business owner and a college professor and
Sure. Simplicity is freedom, in a sense. It allows your precious time to go towards other things instead of, dealing with the same documentation over and over, or the headache. Yeah, the headache of not having everything laid out in a nice document where you don't have to think anymore. You can just check off boxes.
I just want to say thank you to everybody who came tonight, because I get fired up about organization and I love to talk about it. So to know there are other people interested in it, at least, is very exciting for me. And thank you again, Kaylee and Music Therapy Ed, for having me on. And also, if people have questions, email me, because I'm around during the day. Even though I'm not working, I'm with my kids, I still answer emails sometimes. They're napping.
Awesome. So I'll link your email one more time. Atlantic Music Therapy, LLC @gmail.com.
They scared me about that too when I started my business. Put LLC on everything.
Awesome. So it's up, and I also just shared your link for the music therapist page of your website. There is a free ebook that you're giving away that you were talking about. Ebook with so many awesome sample documentation forms, as well as the email campaign that you were talking about with follow-up on how to create your own.
Yes, and if you get the email and you see that you know, the way that my paperwork works, there's a video file that'll come later, and it kind of shows you how the forms work. And that's something you're interested in. I do sell my documentation. I take out my logo and sell it if people are interested in that.
Awesome. So once again, things are already out there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can invest in some awesome, already
Solutions.
very professional solutions. Beautiful. Wonderful. Well, I haven't seen any other questions, just a lot of thank yous.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you all so much. I don't know, Allison, if you have any last closing comments.
I mean, I would say don't be afraid of HIPAA. I mean, be afraid, but don't be too afraid. And if you are thinking about starting a business or you know, changing directions in what you're doing, and you want somebody to talk to, I don't offer a consultation right now, but I can listen and I can tell you, you know, what I've dealt with. So people need a listening ear in there.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Allison. We really appreciate the time that you're taking with us this evening, your precious time, and sharing your vision of simplicity and efficiency for everyone. So thank you so much.
Have a good night, everyone.
The Music Therapy Ed team wants to thank everyone for attending this episode of Mindstorm Mondays. Our next Mindstorm Monday will take place on April 11th and features CJ Shiloh of The Musical Autist and Carrie Devlin of Songs for Success. We will be celebrating April as Autism Acceptance Month, and we are very fortunate to have CJ and Carrie to share the inside scoop from April's Rethinking Autism Conference and provide you with resources to fully presume competence in your clients in your music therapy sessions. So you won't want to miss their expertise if you work with patients with autism or clients with autism, or if you are interested at all. They're amazing, so you're definitely going to want to check that out. As always, you can check out our full list of Mindstorm Monday offerings at musictherapyed.com/mindstorm-Monday. So thank you all so much. And until next time, be well, feel good, and make music. Have a great evening.